Hello, everybody. It is Saturday, October the 26th, 2024, the last Saturday in October. In fact, that was the week tech summary that Keith and I are going to do until, of course, November. We are joined, Keith and I, with a couple of guests from a company called Notebook LM. I'm going to introduce them.
Deep dive into the world of tech.
It's been another crazy week.
It really has. And this week, we're focusing on the theme of AI.
Yeah, specifically how AI is becoming more than just a tool.
Right. It's becoming almost like an independent actor.
Well, we're all sick of those two voices, but we're not sick of Notebook LM. It's really an incredible product. And Keith ran the newsletter this week through Notebook LM to come up with that clip. I think, Keith, you've got the whole video. At what point are those two people going to replace you and I?
You know, if I had a couple more hours, I could take their script and put you and me on as avatars with our voices, and we could, not bother with this real-time live conversation that we're having now.
This charade, this farce, Keith, is real-time human being conversation. Is this in a few years or months or perhaps even days going to appear increasingly superfluous and pointless?
No, because I think our ideas are quite unique and more interesting probably than the bots' ideas. I did listen to the whole 32 minutes, by the way, which I've embedded in this week's newsletter so people can check for themselves. But it's a bit tedious, it's a bit repetitive, and it doesn't really push the edges of thinking. So I would say you and me are more likely to be entertaining than it, at least for now.
Yeah, at least for now. But these products and companies are moving so fast. And of course, as always, it seems on That Was the Week, we're focusing on AI. This week, again, terrible art, Keith. Is this James Bond and a robot? Is that the image?
Correct. Andrew, you nailed it.
Oh, God. I mean, that's even worse than the voices on Notebook LM. The title of this week's newsletter is Agents and Robots. It is definitely happening. What exactly is happening, Keith?
Well, the developments in AI, which we've talked a lot about, the foundation models, this week, most of the announcements coming from the main players were about what they call agentic or agent-based AI, where they can create custom agents, if you will, specialized to a set of tasks and actually carry out the tasks, like a sequence of events to achieve a goal, if you will. Satya Nadella did a whole day in London demonstrating Microsoft platform latest capabilities in that area, and that video is in the newsletter. Anthropic made the announcement that its Claude AI can now act as a user of a computer, doing everything a human would do with making decisions.
Although that didn't impress that many people, the Anthropic application so far. I mean, people see potential, but it's still very early, isn't it, Keith?
It's all very early, but the fact that so much happened in a single week from so many different players implies this is a significant part of the next stage, if you will. And we should take notice, because this is where the conversations we've been having in the last few weeks about how SaaS and the cloud is threatened by AI starts to come to life and be real. And so it is a fairly major thing. Of course, it leads to both good things and bad things. Most of the curated essays this week focus on the good things, but there's one in particular that focuses on the downside. It basically talks about AI agents being trained to take human vulnerability in terms of our ability to be emotionally tweaked and persuaded of things in the way that advertising tries to do or politicians try to do, and that millions of agents are going to be set loose, focused on that as the end goal, and we probably won't know they're agents. We'll think they're human, and so this whole, if you will, brainwashing attempt that you see in the election this week, with Harris saying Trump's a fascist, which clearly he is not, And with Trump saying immigrants are coming out of asylums and prisons, which clearly they mostly are not, that attempt to reduce everything down to memes and get us to believe in things, the fear is that agents will do that on steroids.
Yeah, although I wonder, given that's already happening with characters like Trump, whether it'll actually make a great deal of difference. You talked about it being too early. I always think in Silicon Valley, everyone always talks about it being too early until it's too late, and then no one can invest and the whole market's been wrapped up, and whether there is a middle period. You talk about something called agentic AI in your editorial. You borrow the term, I think, from Andrew Maynard. What exactly is that? Agentic social AI.
Well, probably most people are already familiar with bots. A bot is like an automated social media poster. Agentic AI is the next generation of that, where you could ask an agent to become an X subscriber. It could know a lot about you personally, and that would be true across millions of people. And you could tell it that its goal is to get you to vote for, let's just say, Trump, for the sake of argument. And it would look at your history and try to create arguments in favor of Trump that appeal to you due to who you are. And it could do that at great scale across millions of people, which a bot can't. A bot's just delivering the same message to everyone and is pretty dumb. So agentic AI, I used a bad example. A good example would be you could set it off looking for criminals, and it would look at everyone and profile them. And
so that's a good one. I mean, that's just even more paranoia. Who knows who a criminal is? I remember in Berkeley, when my kids were growing up, there were parents who would run algorithms to find out whether there were child molesters on their street. So I'm not even sure that one's a good.
But you could you could say, I want to do the shopping for this recipe using Instacart and have it delivered tomorrow morning, and it could figure it all out, and you'd get a delivery and you didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, you can already do that though, can't you, pretty much?
No, you have to manually fill in your shopping cart and pick your delivery time. And
that doesn't sound particularly revolutionary. Anyway, what is revolutionary, I think, is Notebook LM. You ran this week's newsletter through the LM algorithm or platform, and you came up with some dominant themes. You've already talked about the rise of agentic AI. A couple of other themes. What is a robotics renaissance? I didn't know that robotics ever went away, Keith.
Robotics hasn't gone away. It's been around a long time and clearly made some progress in fixed installations like production lines, for example. Making cars is a good example. The renaissance was the word picked by Notebook LM. I think, like you, I probably would push back on that word. I think it's more a transformation than a renaissance. It's when human-like, 2 legs, 2 arms, a head and a brain style robots start being able to carry out agentic-like tasks, many of them. And we're already beginning.
Manchurian, I wonder whether both Trump and Harris, in their own way, are already examples of these kind of digital Manchurian candidates. They both seem automated in their own different ways.
Well, I think that's always been true. That's what the advisors and the media people around each candidate are for. They train the candidate against a set of learned messages to have a certain emotional impact on a certain demographic. So there's always a massive amount of control over these candidates. I think what we're going to find is that the ability to extend from the candidate to direct engagement with each of us as individuals is the next stage. And then physical interactions are what robots are about. That's a slightly different set of things. And I don't think politics is really the zone for that. I think military might be.
Yeah, well, certainly, and we'll do many shows, we have done and we will do, on the impact of robotics on war, and also, of course, on loneliness. Sherry Turkle has written extensively on this. Another of the summary themes from Notebook LM on your newsletter this week is Tesla's trajectory. What are they? The company went up 15% in a day? Was it 10 or 15%?
It was actually more. It was 22% at one
It's
point.
astonishing given how large the company is. I mean, this was what, about $150 billion?
Yeah, it's been knocked down both because of Tesla-related issues, like its sales dropped short last quarter by a bit, but also by Musk hatred. That clearly does have some
And
kind of
you're not a Musk hater, are you?
I think Musk, you can love him and hate him at the same time, depending on which part of him you're thinking about.
Yeah, the editorial this week focuses in part on that. Maybe the markets woke up to the fact that you just bought a Tesla, Keith. Is it possible that the price went up 150 billion in a day because of you?
Yeah, that's my explanation. Seems quite reasonable to me.
We'll have to run that through Notebook LM. And
No,
then the fourth dominant theme, which is really part, I guess, of Tesla's trajectory, is what one might call Elon Musk's trajectory, Musk's influence and conflicts, which they're always newsworthy, but particularly newsworthy this week. What happened?
Well, firstly, the New York Times published a piece talking about if Trump wins and Musk is actually given the job predestined for him of rebuilding America, if you will, efficiency is the key word that's used.
Is he is that your term, rebuilding America, or is that his term or Trump's term?
I think it's both of them, and they're really talking about making America more efficient, and the New York Times points out how many conflicts Musk would have in doing that, given all of his business interconnections with the U.S.
You thought you texted me earlier this week. You thought it was a hit piece. You didn't think it was a fair piece.
Well, I think that for two reasons. Yes, the first is I don't think Trump's going to win. We could debate that, but even if he does,
I don't think he's going to win.
And then the second thing is I don't think he'll appoint Musk. I think it's all.
But that's another question. So that's where you and I strongly disagree. So we're 10 days before the election. What are we going to bet, Keith? I bet you that Trump will win.
I wouldn't bet a lot because I think it's super close.
Well, how about your Tesla? It's probably not worth much.
No, I'm definitely not going to bet my Tesla.
How about our wives or our children? Children's a better deal.
Yeah, but I could bet you my youngest. Yeah, you'd love to have him in your house.
Yeah, I think I'll steer clear. Although you can have my youngest. That actually isn't a bad exchange. I'm convinced, but maybe we can talk about that next week, maybe just before the election. So what else? So I agree with you on the second point. I mean, if Trump is elected, which I think he will be, I think that I'm sure there'll be a very early honeymoon, and then something will happen, and one of them will be annoyed, and the other one will just get out of the game, pick up their marbles, and leave.
Yeah, I think that's very likely. I don't know if you noticed, but this morning, SpaceX landed the astronauts that were stranded on the International Space Station that Boeing had left up there, and Boeing is now talking about selling off its space business.
It's astonishing. Yeah, I mean, I've made it clear many times on this show. I mean, I'm not sure I'm a hardcore Musk hater, but I certainly don't like the guy. I'm not as ambivalent as you are. On the other hand, I take your point, Keith, in your good editorial this week, that he is a remarkable innovator on so many levels. So there is this contradiction between Musk as this ultimate annoying jerk on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's just astonishing. I'm guessing in an age of social media, probably Edison would have appeared in the same way, or Carnegie, or certainly Henry Ford. There is something about these remarkable innovators that also make them really dislikable.
Well, I don't dislike him. If you think about if you separate out what motivates him, it really, there's nothing very offensive other than his views about immigrants, I think. That's the one area where I really
How
object.
did you enjoy the play, Mrs. Lincoln? I mean, that's enough to make him profoundly dislikable.
Yeah.
And
So,
also, I mean, his shameless embrace of Trump. I mean, Trump is many things, but he's not he's not someone who's sympathetic to Musk's view of the world. So it's clearly just an opportunistic move from Musk. I mean, he could have just as easily tied his money and his brand to Harris. It might have been much more useful.
yeah. Well, I think there's no downside for him because if Harris wins, I suspect the US will keep embracing Musk anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they can't. I mean, he's not only the world's. I mean, he's not only the world's most richest man, which obviously is significant, but also increasingly the most powerful man. In some ways, he might be more powerful than the president.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but there's rumors this week that he's been talking to Putin.
Yeah.
And Putin got him to agree not to turn on Starlink in Taiwan at the request of the Chinese premier. I think it's all BS, but
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, it does point. You've talked about this, about the dwindling of the nation state and the rise of these new agents, these new super innovators, multi-trillionaire types like Musk. Other key facts and insights with our help from our friends at Notebook LM. The future of LLMs, AI agents in the workplace. Keith, what else is interesting? EV dominance, Stripe embraces crypto. They've laid it all out for us. We don't need to do it ourselves.
Exactly. So these are not your pet topics, are they? But Mark Andreessen's piece that the future of LLMs focuses on is saying that the unit of cost in LLMs is called a token. And he posits that the price of a token is trending towards zero. And so that ultimately LLMs will be free. And that owning an LLM model, therefore, won't be a differentiator.
So that is contrasts with your argument about the value of OpenAI, doesn't it?
It could. It depends. It depends whether OpenAI leverages its model to build the rest of the stack, as in quotes.
So we talked about the stack the last couple of times, and OpenAI or Anthropic's control of the stack.
But you can download the 70 billion parameter Facebook model called Llama 3 point something, and you can run it on your Mac with an M2 chip or above, and you can basically get your own version of OpenAI that's perfectly capable of doing all kinds of things, all on your own machine at home. In fact,
but you do have to pay for it, don't you?
No, it's open source. You just run it on your machine. You got to be a bit technical to set it up, but there's YouTube videos taking you through the steps. And then you've got your own, literally within your house, you've got your own version of OpenAI. It's kind of interesting that it made me think there's probably a business in producing a home AI where it wouldn't be a robot, just be a little box, and you put it on your home network, and that becomes your AI, and it's fully distributed and free, basically.
Right now, coming back to Andreessen, of course, whose first huge success was Netscape. I don't think we've had and maybe we never will, but there hasn't been a Netscape moment where suddenly all this stuff becomes accessible to ordinary users. Even you've acknowledged that actually putting Notebook LM, using this show and your and my voices and faces, it's quite a lot of work. But companies are all working on fixing that.
Except, and this is just this week, but Apple released iOS 18.2 to developers like me. And if I do this, ask ChatGPT what the best season is for oysters in Inverness, California.
Ooh.
And you can't see it. because it's going to show me text, but it's answering me, and it's built into. I don't know if we can make the screen see that.
No, we can't. But that's just a more
Well, it's
the audio version of Google, isn't it?
No, because you're talking directly to OpenAI, and the quality of the response is fantastic. So you've really got in your pocket now access to all the world's intelligence in the form of questions and answers, including very complicated, hard questions.
Yeah, well, you've got oysters on the mind, Keith, in Inverness, which are delicious, making me hungry. A couple of other interesting key facts and insights from this week, at least according to Notebook LM. EV dominance. I always get two messages on EV dominance. On the one hand, you always get these articles suggesting that consumers don't want EVs, so the prices are coming down. On the other hand, inevitably, in the long run, as Keynes would say, we're all dead. So everyone who says, well, in the end, EVs are going to win, who knows? What's the news on EV dominance?
This is a really, really good essay by Noah Smith, who has a newsletter called No Opinion, which is the detailed look at the rise of EVs and the likely timeline to their ultimate success. It's a really, really good.
And the essay is called EVs Are Just Going to Win.
Yeah. So it's not about Tesla, it's just about EVs. By the way, in most of Northern Europe, something above 80% of all new car registrations are now EVs.
Yeah, and I know in Norway there are more EVs now than gas cars.
So America's a little bit behind, surprisingly, which is, I think, more to do with Americans clinging on to their Ford Mustangs and the like. But it is completely clear that EVs will not just win, but take over. And even government policy is focused on that happening by a certain date. That date keeps slipping, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and Notebook LM have been kind enough to give us some notable quotes. The quote from Smith on EVs. So EVs are just a superior technology to combustion cars. They're soon to be cheaper. They're more convenient. They're much easier to maintain. They're more powerful and far more silent. They will mostly replace combustion vehicles. It's just a matter of when. Well, it's not just a matter, because that could be 100 years, 10 years, or 1,000 years.
I think it's probably 10 years.
Well, judging from San Francisco, another question is when self-driving cars will replace traditional cars. So that's another interesting.
It isn't in the newsletter, but Waymo raised another $5 to $6 billion this week to,
and that's another. Well, I guess Google or
it was Google, yeah,
Alphabet company. So and another. Since we've got the notable quotes here, we've got Anthropic on its computer-used API available today on the API. Developers can direct Claude to use computers the way people do, by looking at a screen, moving a cursor, clicking buttons, and typing text. We already talked a little bit about this, but is it true, Keith?
I haven't used it, to be honest, Andrew, because I'm not sure I have a use case for that yet. So I haven't played with it, but I think it's true. I've seen some YouTube videos of other people doing it. So it looks true. And you can imagine, you and me are both old enough to remember, I don't know if you're techie enough to remember this, but batch files. Batch files were something that DOS used before Windows. And you could program a sequence of tasks in a text file, and then you would just call the text file and it would carry out the sequence of tasks. So to some extent, there's something dumber and not very new about this. Where it gets really interesting is when you just give it, book me a United flight to New York on December 3rd, leaving around noon, and make sure it doesn't cost more than $500, and it just does the whole thing for you. That's the interesting bit. And I think we're getting to that.
Just to go back to the Maynard piece on agentic AI, the notable quote that Notebook LM added from him was, all it needs is AI models that are capable of influencing people to achieve specific goals by utilizing patterns and associations between behavioral cause and effect that are extricable from zettabytes of human-centric data. Isn't that basically any different from advertising, from the thinking of marketing pioneers in the 20th century?
I'd say advertising does that at an abstract level, and it puts you into a demographic bucket where maybe there's 100 buckets and you're in 5 of them. But after that, it's pretty much the targeting is poor at best. You've probably seen ads on Google to buy things that you've just bought, for example.
Or don't mind, yeah.
Now, what this is as we discussed earlier, a whole level beyond that. This is a real-time thinking agent, if you will, that's able to look at you and your history of posts across or within contexts and specifically look for behavioral cause and effect on you personally that would only work on you.
Right. Is this chilling or good? I mean, on the one hand, of course, it only gives us what we want, but it knows us, as Eric Schmidt once famously promised incorrectly about Google, it knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah, well, it really depends on whether it's working for you or working for somebody that wants to influence you. And then the second thing is, how independent-minded are you? I mean, I don't know about you, but
I'm not independent-minded. I only do what you do or say.
Yeah, of course. You're the most follow the crowd person I know.
Yeah, I'm crowdsourced. And the final, one of your pet themes, Keith, is, and I agree with you actually mostly on this, is how Europe is lagging behind the US when it comes to innovation. The final quote is from Guillaume Roux Romestang, sounds like a fictional character, on Europe's tech scene. To them, Europe is akin to an emerging market, kind of like your little cousin doing antics on Christmas Day. Mildly interesting, but you can't wait for them to graduate to the adult table. Is Europe ever going to graduate to the adult table, Keith?
I think it's been there and left, hasn't it? He's slightly wrong in characterizing it as a young cousin. It's more like an aging senior that has got dementia. Not to be cruel, because we're all going to end up there at some point. But this story is actually about an AI company called 11x that raised money, but is moving from Europe to the United States, which I put in because it's a trend. My talk in Brussels recently was all about Europe's challenges and why entrepreneurs choose to leave and come to the States. And this is just a fantastic current example of that. So it reinforces the things we've talked about in previous weeks, and it's just more evidence to that. It's sad, actually, in a way.
I mentioned Maynard Keynes earlier. John Maynard Keynes, the great 20th century economist who famously said, "In the long run, we're all dead." Our video of the week is one of mine. You've been very generous to put it in. I interviewed Robert Skidelsky, who's the most authoritative scholar, writer on Keynes. He's the author of 3-volume biography of Keynes, as well as a 1-volume bestseller. He has a new book out. It's called Mindless: The Human Condition in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. The conversation I thought was most interesting when we talked about Keynes. Is there such a thing, Keith, do you think, as the human condition in the age of AI? I'm always a bit skeptical of that.
I'm with you on being skeptical. I actually think, contrary to popular opinion, especially elite opinion, human beings are incredibly smart and intelligent and very, very difficult to persuade to change their ideas.
Just like you and I, right?
Just like you and I. So the idea that I haven't read the book, so tell me if I'm reading too much into the title, but mindless, I think, is like what Hillary Clinton talked about, the deplorables, is this elite idea that people are just easy to program, if you will. I don't agree with that at all. I think people are determinedly self-interested based on their experience of life, and really, really hard to brainwash.
I think if that's true, then you're wrong about, well, maybe you're right about Clinton. And I mean, if that's true, maybe you're right. who is more likely to win the election? Who's a bigger brainwasher, Harris or Trump?
I'd say Harris. I
Is a
think,
bigger brainwasher?
well, it may seem like a weird answer, but I think Trump tells it like he sees it, which is, there's too many foreigners coming across the border and coming into American towns and cities. He exaggerates, of course, but that probably aligns somewhat with people's real world experience. He talks about the establishment not caring about ordinary people, which, given that ordinary people are voting for him mostly, it's not rich people. There's probably some truth in that. And so I think he's like an accidental clown who's captured something that's already in the air.
Yeah, he's also right on foreigners because I'm not an illegal immigrant, but I'm an immigrant. And I have to admit, I eat a lot of my neighbors' pets.
You do.
We have a barbecue, the cats, the dogs, the
Exactly.
gerbils, the
Exactly.
goldfish. So we enjoy eating our neighbors' pets. So
But
I'm sure I'm not alone on that.
But funny as that is, Andrew, none of us believe his BS, right? But we do actually think he's keying into something real, which is why he ends up being more popular than he should be.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that, yeah, as you say, he's sort of weirdly more honest than she is in the sense that he exaggerates the truth and she just basically avoids even addressing it. Anyway, let's do a show next week, Keith, on the election, because by next weekend, that's all anyone will be able to think about. Let's move on to your startup of the week, which I think in many ways is in keeping with the themes of agents and robots. It's a machine learning for healthcare documents, TENNR, Tenor, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Is this, why'd you choose this one?
Well, because I think when addressing this move towards agents, it's important to look at the human improvement that can happen because of them, as opposed to this idea that we're all children and we're going to get brainwashed. So I put this in because it's a great example of a good use case. We all know that health documents is one of the, the fact that you have 5 doctors and Dr. A can't see the documents from Dr. B is ridiculous.
I mean, the healthcare system, and maybe I'm about to make a kind of neoliberal argument here, but because it's a kind of monopoly, they're so inefficient. One of the things that's most astonishing to me, as for better or worse, like everybody in America, a user of American healthcare, is the only time one ever either gets a telephone call or has to make a telephone call is to your doctor, because they just don't care. They won't do email. They don't do text. There's no competition.
Yeah, mine still does faxes.
Are you serious? You have to fax something over?
If you need like a clearance for your kid to do sport at school, you have to be able to receive a fax.
Now, how do you receive a fax?
There's a web service called eFax that I subscribe to that fakes a fax machine and then forwards it to your email. But how bizarre is that?
Yeah, and the industry, the healthcare industry, is so, I don't know whether it's prone or vulnerable or open to innovation, but at some point, whatever Trump or Harris does or doesn't say about healthcare, all this new technology must inevitably change it, make it more efficient, won't it?
One would hope so. Bureaucracy can always get in the way and stop it, but you hope that there's enough incentive to make it happen.
I would vote for a presidential candidate who wants to make telephone calls illegal. Do you think that would be a vote winner?
I'd like it if they made marketing calls illegal. I don't think I'd want to make all phone calls illegal, but marketing calls, yes.
Yeah, well, maybe that's an idea for another election. So Tenor is your startup of the week. And finally, your post of the week. And you took it off Substack, not you know what, from somebody called Andre Vurakas. What does Vurakas say this week?
So the post, I've got to find it actually, because I can't remember the answer to your
question. Well, I'll read it out while you're
finding it. I found it. Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Don't become a data scientist.
This is very funny. I work with data in my day job, and he's talking about statistical modeling inferences and designing experiments, which none of which require machine learning. They basically require skills in statistics and heuristics. And he's basically saying if you really want to understand data and do machine learning, what data scientists do with LLMs is not even in the same domain as what you would do with data. And he's distinguishing between the two. I thought it was great because that distinction is lost on most people.
Yeah, and he says if you love building models, become a machine learning engineer. What exactly does that mean?
A machine learning engineer is a term that encapsulates quite a lot of different jobs, but there's data preparation, there's data querying, there's data platform management, an organization. There's all kinds of stuff to do with data well before you do machine learning on the data. And the whole soup to nuts process of data up to machine learning is about 10 different jobs. And they've all got titles and names, none of which are data scientists. That's his point.
And this AI revolution for Bill West is going to get rid of all these middle layers, isn't it? On so many different fronts.
Yes, it will, but it's not there yet. In fact, it's weird, but the one part of the AI ecosystem that is still highly manual is data. Learning from data is what models do, and machine learning acts on data. But most of the work to get to the point where you can even start doing those things is still highly manual.
Well, maybe it will be fixed by next week, by November of 2024, when we will be back. We'll do a special. I know you're not keen on talking about politics, Keith, because you do the Gilmore Gang, which is a more political broadcast. But I think next week we can't avoid talking about the election, can we?
Well, by the way, there's a Gilmore Gang tomorrow.
Well, enjoy the Gilmore Gang. Enjoy your week, Keith, and we will talk again in November of 2024. So thank you so much.
Bye.